Welcome to the Good Reading Podcast, proudly sponsored by Book People Gift Cards. A Book People gift card is the perfect gift for readers of all ages. Simply order your gift card online at bookpeoplegiftcards.org.au. Redeem at any one of over 500 bookshops across Australia. Visit bookpeoplegiftcards.org.au. Writers of the Future is a science fiction, fantasy and speculative fiction short story contest established by Hubbard in 1983. Each year, an anthology of short stories is published along with illustrations from a sister contest, Illustrators of the Future. Now in its 40th volume, Writers of the Future is a best-selling collection of prize-winning short stories and science fiction art by new creative talent. Today, I'm talking to the president of Galaxy Press, John Goodwin, about the competition and the 40th anniversary volume of Writers of the Future. I'll also be joined by Sean Williams, a science fiction writer and past winner of the Writers of the Future Award and now judge for the contest, and also to Connor Chamberlain, who is the winner of the award for illustration in this year's anthology. John Goodwin, president of Galaxy Press, welcome to the Good Reading Podcast.
Thank you very much. Great to be here.
Writers of the Future celebrates its 40th volume in 2024. Now, that's quite an achievement. But what do you think is behind the enduring popularity of science fiction storytelling?
One of the things is that science fiction provides a platform to discuss issues that are no longer safe to discuss in public. Maybe you've experienced that. You can visit new and exciting worlds, but you can also take on topics that you're not able to talk about right now in society, or specifically on social media. You can't talk religion now. You can't talk politics now, at least in America. Maybe it's different over there where you are in Australia, but it's so volatile that when you have science fiction, you can discuss these things and put them in another environment and other people. So you can look at them and go like, that's really silly. And you can come to your own conclusions. I fell in love originally myself with science fiction with E. Doc Smith's Lensman series. That was my introduction to science fiction, and followed with L. Ron Hubbard's Battlefield Earth right after that. But I was able to identify with characters and so could suspend my own disbelief, which is basically what you're looking for with good science fiction. That's what people enjoy as well. You see that at least in all the science fiction and fantasy that we publish with Writers of the Future, is you get that kind of stuff, and invariably we get amazing reviews, and we got something for everybody, because one review might say, I love story AB, and somebody else will say, oh, I love DE, and that's something that good science fiction will do. It has something for everybody.
Now, Writers of the Future delves into the areas of science fiction and fantasy fiction, but also this area called speculative fiction.
Well, basically, speculative fiction was a term that was created probably in the 40s, maybe 50s. It's now broadened to become just an overview of all types of what-if type fiction. So it could be, the science side of it, which would be, what if we did go faster than the speed of light? Or what if we are going to go to another planet? What's it going to be like there? Or how are we can deal with these different aliens coming to Earth? Fantasy is the other thing too, is what if you had an occasion to meet a fairy or a djinn or a genie or so speculative gives you a chance to think and wonder about something. And that's kind of like become the broad basket that all of these different genres and subgenres fall into, called speculative fiction.
What have you observed in the evolution of science fiction writing? How has that been manifested in Writers of the Future publications?
That's a great question. Science fiction is always a few steps ahead of technology. When I was growing up as a baby boomer, World War II and Korea were experienced by our parents. I missed Vietnam draft by a month, but at that time we met George Jetson and his wife Jane in flying cars and robot maids. Then in the 80s, we discovered Luke Skywalker and the Force, and heroes started getting more flawed. Like Han Solo and the Millennium Falcon. He wasn't like your standard hero. Now we're heavily influenced by AI and the rise of incredible technology. As science fiction fantasy has grown, we've kind of like with Writers of the Future, because pretty much winners of Writers of the Future have gone on to be like you're going to be interviewing Sean Williams on this. He was a winner, and he started directing the future of what we learned to love it as science fiction. He did the Star Wars, but he had several series they did as well. You had certain subgenres, like you had steampunk. Well, that was actually written and published in Rise of the Future about half a dozen years before it became something that you saw in mainstream. Tim Powers, one of our judges, wrote the essay. He actually came up with the term with one of the other authors at the time was steampunk and what the genre was. So Rise of the Future kind of like is that forerunner of what you're seeing as mainstream right now, which is probably one of the biggest things you're going to find with Rise of the Future books, is that these are the writers you're going to be reading in half a dozen years.
And what do you think's changed in terms of content and style over those 40 volumes?
What we're always looking for is a fresh take. We're not necessarily looking at new tropes. AI has been around for a while. Uploading, your awareness into a computer is nothing new. We've had that in Rise of the Future for 20 years. But it's a fresh take on it that we're able to get. And so it's not the strong guy with a chiseled chin, and 18-inch biceps that's going out there and beating the enemy and wooing the maid in distress, type thing. You don't find that anymore. What we try to do with Rise of the Future is it still is that storyline that L. Ron Hubbard created, that Robert Heinlein said, look, I learned that there is a new storyline. What you have is the man that learned better, or the person that learned better. So it's somebody that's going down maybe the wrong path, but then they're forced to some type of confrontation and they decide to do the right thing. And so that's one thing that you'll find that a lot in Rise of the Future is uplifting stories, something that you can relate to, and being able to relate to it, we got to have a current environment. So society's changed a lot right now. You've got devices, you got these things, so it has to deal with that. Whereas 40 years ago, things are a lot simpler. So we don't have those type of really simple storylines that make it through. You don't have like your fairy princess, your Cinderella, your that type of stuff. It's more complicated society, but it's still, with short stories, you still have to have one basic storyline, one arc that you're telling. Otherwise, it's gonna be too shallow of a person.
In creating volumes for Writers of the Future and from the work of contest winners, what makes a winner?
For the most part, they've been working at it for a while. We've had the longest running person that's been entering is, I think he took 42 entries before finally winning. We've had many times recently that people have been going at it for 15, 20 years before winning the contest. It's a proven market. It's a proven successful market that writers will name and target. And because of its success and the fact that even now, with due to the volume of entries, a person who can say, I received an honorable mention, their work will be taken out of slush piles by editors. It's that well known as a contest. Rarely does a person make it on the first submission. We had one winner this past year who studied the last 3 or 4 volumes, found all the different characteristics. He put all those characteristics in a spreadsheet and went to sleep that night and came up with an idea. He wrote that story, submitted it, and won. The judges have long said, read the books. That'll show you what we're looking for. And it's true, because these writers are now pros. They're now considered a professional writer, having been amateur before winning this. But we've got a free online writing workshop that's taught by Orson Scott Card, Tim Powers, and Dave Wolverton, plus a dozen essays that L. Ron Hubbard wrote on the craft of writing. We want to be able to help a person actually make it.
Writers of the Future has a sister contest, Illustrators of the Future. What do you look for in an illustration that might qualify it for publication, and the way, I suppose, it connects to a story?
Well, the thing that the judges look for, and again, as an administrator, I have no control over what the judges decide. I get told who the winners were, so I'll make that very clear. And that said, what the judges look for with the illustrators, they send 3 illustrations in. So an illustration, by definition, tells a story in the image. You get a story, it conveys something. It's not a picture, it's not a painting of a scene. It actually is telling a piece of a story. So what the judges are looking for are something that really communicates with incredible clarity a story. And so what you do is you submit 3 pieces of art, and that's what the judges review. Then, after they've picked the winners, each of the winners is sent one of the winning stories from the writer contest, and then their art directed on illustrating that story. It's those 12 illustrations that are judged to see who the grand prize winner is. So they have a 2-tier contest there. But just like stories, it's a fresh take on being able to tell a story and communicate something. And all the books have color plates now, going back for the last 10 volumes, of what the winners are. So you can see how good you have to be. But it's not like you have to do Disney art or Marvel art or any specific type of art. It's just got to be telling a story. So you'll look at all the winners, you can see half a dozen different styles of art. It's anybody that can really convey a good illustration that tells a story, whatever art form they do. And you'll see it if you look at a Rise of the Future book, see all the different styles that are chosen. And that's, again, why you should get a book and look at it and see what your competitors are, what you're up against, what quality you look up against, and the different styles that have won.
And Tibetan authors and illustrators have been very well represented in the winners' circle lately. What is distinctive about authors and illustrators from this part of the world?
It all began back with Sean Tan in 1992 in Volume 8. He was an illustrator winner, and he's gone on now to win an Academy Award, the Astrid Lindgren Award, and just any other award that you can imagine. For him, being out in the middle of nowhere, he didn't know there were other people like him. He thought he was the only one doing this type of stuff. He thought it was just like, wow, I'm the only guy. When he was flown to United States and he met other people, like, there's other people like me. In the following year, Sean Williams was a writer winner, and he's now #1 New York Times bestselling author. What we do with Australian winners is there's a definite grittiness to it. You know, there's Australia and New Zealand has that lot more of a rugged approach to life. You know, no walkers. Since then, we've had Lee Battersby, we've had Kat Sparks. She's done many, many books. She's very popular. Ian McHugh. We've had Alexandra Zwern, Jason Fisher, Ben Mann, Samantha Murray, Amit Duda, Chris Winsberry, he's a grand prize winner in 2020, Michael Gardner, J.A. Becker, and then this year, Connor Chamberlain. So we've got a really great representation, which is just amazing. And I look forward, because of our interview, getting even more winners. We had, in one year, 2015, we had 2 winners from Australia. Both Samantha Murray was a writer winner, and Amit Dutta was an illustrator winner. But it's a matter of people knowing about it, knowing it's available for them to enter, that you can enter the contest. It's free to enter. We don't change your English. You know, so the English that you use is what gets published in the book. So that's one thing we changed about 10 years ago. If you've got UK English, you've got Canadian, we've got Australian. So different phrases, you know, if it's a certain term or certain expressions, we don't say, no, we need to Americanize it. We keep it whatever that nationality is. So you definitely are going to be true to your country if you submit and win, and you can carry your flag to America with pride when you come there as a winner.
John Goodwin, thank you for your insights into writing and writers of the future, and thank you so much for joining me on the Good Reading Podcast.
Thank you very much for having me as a guest.
And now I'd like to introduce Sean Williams. Sean is a former winner of Writers of the Future and now a judge for the contest. Sean, welcome to the Good Reading Podcast.
Thanks very much. Great to be here, Greg.
What do you think is behind the enduring popularity of science fiction storytelling?
Well, I think it's the same question that lies behind all storytelling, that question of what if. But in science fiction, that question can be as large as our imagination can possibly take it. What if has no limits in science fiction. What if isn't constrained by the normal laws of the real world. So we can speculate about things in the future, things in the past, things far off. And science fiction, of course, on the written page has an unlimited special effects budget. So it outstrips even the biggest films in the world right now in terms of spectacle and high concept action and storytelling. And it's my favorite genre still after all these years.
Now, I'll ask you about being a judge in the Writers of the Future contest in a moment, but first, tell me about your experience as a contestant in Writers of the Future and what it meant for your career as a science fiction writer.
I have to cast my mind back quite a long way. I don't do this, listeners. If you're at university, I dropped out of university to become a writer, and I gave myself 10 years to publish a novel. And when I was pursuing this, my technique was to write lots of short stories so I could try lots of different things. And I wasn't confident enough to submit stories to any actual editors or magazines. But my sister told me about an article she'd seen in the newspaper about a contest that if I won, got me money and a trip to America and was judged by all my favorite writers. And I thought, okay, well, I'll enter that and see what happens, because, you know, if I win, wouldn't that be amazing? If I don't win, then no one will know if I don't tell anybody. And the beauty of that was that it had a 3-month deadline. So every 3 months, there was another entry point. So that gave me 3 months to write a new story and submit it. I was writing more than that, but having that deadline just made sure that I kept on moving. And the first 6 or 7 stories that I submitted didn't win anything. Of course, I wasn't very good back then, but slowly I got better. And I think my 7th or 8th story received an honorable mention, which was a huge encouragement. And around that time, I started submitting stories to magazines and so on and so forth. And because it's a competition for amateur writers, I was aware that my time was running out. I was starting to make professional sales, and if I had too many of them, then I would have to stop submitting. But I still really wanted to win, so I kept submitting to the competition, submitting my best stories. And my very last submission, my 10th submission to the contest, was the last one I was going to be able to submit. After that point, I wouldn't be eligible anymore. And that one won 3rd prize in my quarter. And it was, I remember getting the phone call from the woman then who administered the award, telling me that I'd won a prize and would be going to LA for the award ceremony and meeting so many of my favorite writers and doing the workshop. I couldn't believe what I was hearing, that after all this time, I'd finally managed to get over the line. It was the most exciting news I'd received in my life at that point. It was just a brilliant validation and such a way to start the next phase of my career with this great sense of accomplishment behind me. And going to the States was incredible, you know, getting to meet other writers. I'd never really met science fiction writers like me before. I'd met a couple, but here was a whole room full of them, as well as published authors, you know. It was incredible.
Short stories are the desired form for Writers of the Future. What is essential in the short form of storytelling?
It's interesting. So I teach at a university now as well as write. And this is something we're always trying to encourage our students to get a handle on, because most of our students want to write novels or scripts or, you know, large scale work. And some of them treat writing stories or approach writing stories first as a chore. Like, why should they have to compress their genius ideas down to these tiny morsels? And they try to squeeze whole novels into stories, which of course don't work, into this short space. The beauty of a short story is that it captures a critical moment in the life of a character, and it gives the reader a glimpse of the world that surrounds those characters. And those worlds and those characters can and should be completely memorable in their depth of feelings and their sense of reality, because they're targeted, they're intensely strategic. They can have an incredible effect on the reader without them even knowing it. I think of them as stilettos. Novels are tanks. Novels are tanks. They kind of roll over you and grind you into dust, and then they move on, leaving you in the wake going, wow, gee, I wish I had more of that. But a short story is like a stiletto, the old knife that goes in and out of you without you even realizing that you've been stabbed. That's a brutal metaphor. But that's how I kind of think about it, that it's a strategic injection of wonder and amazement and emotional reality that it's all you need sometimes. Something beautiful and small.
I want to talk about something that Jodie Lynn Nye, the editor of the current volume, volume 40, has written about. She says, "Let me hear your voice," and goes on to mention imaginative world building. First of all, are these essential for good storytelling? And how do you pack all that into the short story form?
Voice is a little bit easier. That's the easier thing. It should be in every sentence. And voice doesn't have to be flowery and verbose and complex and poetic. And it can be those things too, of course, and can be really powerful. And I think people have voices without even realizing it. I was raised by a bunch of science fiction writers who led by example in saying that the voice should be transparent. The text should be a pane of glass that you can see the story through. And I've kind of had to unlearn that a little bit as I get older to become confident in my voice. But I still had a voice there. And every work of fiction is about world building, creating the world for the reader, so they can have that sense of stepping into another place for a moment, if it's a short story, for longer, if it's a novel, because that's partly what fiction is all about, showing us other worlds, other places, other times. And the act of building a world, I don't want to say it makes writers like gods, but it is a little bit like that. It's an incredibly powerful and generous feeling. And of course, the reader gives as much of that process as the writer does. It's a collaborative process. The writer drops little hints as to what the world is, and then the reader fills in the rest. And I often use Star Wars, the very first movie, as an example of this, that we didn't know back then what the Clone Wars was, or what the Force was really, or even much about the Jedi Knights. They were just phrases kind of seeded throughout the novel. The Kessel Run, the spice mining, all this stuff were hints to suggest that there was a larger world outside the film, and readers could supply the rest. And that for me was what made that particular story so exciting, and what makes good stories exciting in turn.
Now, your list of accomplishments as an author are prodigious, including multiple Ditmar and Aurealis awards. But as a judge for the Writers of the Future contest, what do you look for in the writing for that contest?
I look for, well, it's a long list, and I don't want it to scare off any people who might be considering entering, because you want great characters, you want believable worlds, you want style that is effective and fluid and as beautiful as the story needs it to be. I want something that underlies the story. The story has to be about something sincere and powerful and relevant. And I want to be thrilled too. I think this is the part of science fiction and fantasy. I wrote an article for The Conversation once about the five senses of storytelling, like sense of justice, sense of humor, so on and so forth. And the fifth one is the sense of wonder. And that is the sense that lies at the heart of so much fiction, but especially science fiction and fantasy, that I want a winner of the Writers of the Future contest to make me go, wow, that was amazing. That was extraordinary. Whether it's the vistas of space, or whether it's a particular startling quirk of characterization, whether it's a beautiful turn of phrase, I want my sense of wonder to be engaged very powerfully and very confidently in a story that wins.
Musical composition once played a big part in your life, which included an award for a work titled Release of Anger some time ago. I understand that musical composition is still a big part of your life, but can that craft, that art of composition, play some role in your life as an author?
Yes, in two ways. So I've always felt that the same part of my brain that writes words writes music as well. And I think it's a kind of a structural instinct that operates when I'm pursuing both art forms, that there's the sense of movement through sound and the movement through words are very similar when I create. When I write words, when I write novels, I listen to music. So music is a really important part of my creative process. There's usually one album per novel that I get stuck on. It just plays on a loop. It's usually an album by a guy called Steve Roach in the States, who's been making ambient music since the 80s. He's one of the great pioneers of commercial ambient music. So that kind of music has been part of my process forever. A few years ago, I decided that I would make a conscious effort to return to music, because writing you don't write 60 books in 25 years and have time to do much else. And I decided that I would slow down the writing a bit and go back to writing music, because I felt like that was something that I wanted to return to. And I decided that I would write the kind of music that I liked to write words to. So I've been making ambient experimental music for the last 5 or 6 years and have released a few albums. In fact, my last album was a collaboration with Steve Roach. So I felt like I came full circle to working with the creator who helped me create so many works. And That's the second strand, I think, that I now write music that helps me write, which is a little bit incestuous. A little bit of a closed circle there, but I find they fuel each other a little bit too. And some of my writing is for music as well, which I'm working on as well, or for soundtracks that are involved in storytelling in ways that don't involve words.
Sean, it's been great to talk to you, and thank you so much for joining me on the Good Reading Podcast.
My pleasure. Wonderful to chat with you.
And now I'm going to introduce Connor Chamberlain, who is a recent winner of the Illustrators of the Future contest. Connor, welcome to the Good Reading Podcast.
Thank you very much for having me.
Your illustration is included in the 40th anniversary volume and accompanies the story Da Kota by Amir Agura. Tell me a little bit about that story and what you draw on to create the published image.
Yeah, it's a very interesting story that Amir created. It's what I would consider to be historical fantasy. So it takes place in a real setting and time frame, but embellishes some details and changes a few things and injects some fantasy into a real world setting. And this story in particular is focused on a young Native American man coming to terms with colonization and what that means for him, not only through losing his land and his family, but also his culture and those parts of his personality. It's really interesting trying to turn words into an image. Like a lot of art comes from just the imagination and from emotion, but when you're trying to communicate a story with an illustration, it's a really interesting challenge. And this story I read, maybe 8 times before I even got something. Because it is based in history, there's already so many existing images that you can think of. And for me, the story, the character itself has a connection to archery, and he is an archer himself. That was sort of the part that I gravitated towards, because it was within that moment where he draws an arrow that he can remember his past and his history. So I created an image where the character is drawing back a bow, and within the window of the bow and arrow, there is the image of his past and his history. So it's almost as if there's a window to the past from the present within the drawing of an arrow.
And what is the illustrating process for you, and what kind of mediums do you use?
So these days, I'm mainly a digital artist. So I have an iPad with an Apple Pencil that I use. And the fantastic thing about that is it's essentially you have a canvas in every color paint in the world. And you can take it wherever you want, and you can work from a sketch right through to a completely finished image. But I always do carry a sketchbook around on me for traditional stuff as well. But finished images is all digital these days.
The image you create has to go into a printed page, into a book. Do you need to consider the printing process, and how might that change your original concept of the drawing? And how might you compensate or adjust for that printing process?
Yeah, a big challenge with digital art is that things look a lot more vibrant and distinct on a digital screen. Of course, you've got that backlighting coming through, so things pop a lot more. So I've got to be very conscious of that when it comes to printing. The beauty of being able to produce a piece of work for this book and the story through this competition was that they took the reins with the printing process. So I didn't have to worry about it in this situation. But for other personal work that I've done, I always like to do a test print and tweak various settings to try and get it as close as possible to the digital image that I've created personally.
And of course, you were a prize winner of Illustrators of the Future, and part of that prize is being whisked off to Los Angeles. What did you take away from the workshops?
It was beyond an honor to win, honestly. The greatest part of that competition is that absolutely being a small town boy from New Zealand going to LA is surreal. But you get to spend a week with the other prize winners, who are all fantastic creators, who are all very inspirational people. But then we get to learn from the masters. So these are artists, illustrators whose names I've seen on Magic the Gathering cards, fantasy books, everything like that. So these are our heroes, these are our superstars, and getting to learn from them the path forward and the journey that we can take to one day maybe be as good as they are.
And is science fiction or illustration for science fiction something you normally pursue, or is that something a bit of a tangent for you?
I gravitate towards it. I'm a big nerd. So science fiction and fantasy It's been my bread and butter for as long as I can remember. And yeah, so that's always been the most interesting thing for me to draw and illustrate, to create a reality that feels real, but it's just outside of reality has always been the most fun for me.
You live in the beautiful South Island of New Zealand, Dunedin. It's a wonderful landscape. Does that place influence your style and your subject matter?
I think it has to. It's always hard to sort of take yourself out of your environment and try to imagine yourself living in a different place. But yeah, I initially started as a landscape artist. And I'd say that definitely came from, my childhood. I grew up on a sheep farm, and we just had these green hills looking over towards this mountain range. And I don't think I've drawn a landscape painting without a mountain in it. And I think that probably comes back to my childhood. So that was definitely where it all started. And just being inspired by the world around you is pretty impossible when I'm fortunate enough to live in a place as beautiful as this.
What does winning this prize, the Illustrators of the Future prize, mean for you as an illustrator into the future?
I think as an artist in today's world, it's really hard to get a gauge on how good you are. Like, we create a piece of work and you might post it on social media or put it into a gallery. But once it's left your hands, you sort of have no idea of how it's interpreted and how people interact with it. So to be able to get an accolade and a prize for art is it's reassuring that I'm on the right path, I suppose I'd say. I'm doing something right, and if I continue down this path, then hopefully I can accomplish what I want to and succeed in my dreams. But yeah, for me, it was just really encouraging that I am heading in the right direction.
Where else might our listeners find your work?
You can find me on Instagram. My handle is Con J Chamberlain. You can also find me as Connor Chamberlain online. Most of my work these days is on the internet. And yeah, you can find me there if you want to see some fantasy paintings and mountains, as I said.
Great to talk to you, Connor. Thanks for joining me on the Good Reading Podcast.
Hey, thank you so much, Greg.
I've been talking to John Goodwin, president of Galaxy Press, author Sean Williams, and illustrator Connor Chamberlain about the 40th anniversary volume of Writers of the Future. It's published by Galaxy Press, and you can find it at goodreadingmagazine.com.au. My name's Greg Dobbs, and thanks for listening. This Good Reading Podcast was brought to you by Book People Gift Cards. Share the joy of reading with a Book People gift card. To find out more, visit bookpeoplegiftcards.org.au.